Okay, so you heard that recording in
Yes,
progress.
yes.
Great, fantastic. Hi everyone. Today I have Jason Thibodeau with me. Um, he's a philosopher. He has PhD from University of California, San Diego. He has published two papers on divine command theory, and he has multiple YouTube videos explaining divine command theory and criticizing it, right? Examining divine command theory in very thorough, in very in-depth way. Um, is there anything else you want to say about yourself, Jason?
I teach at a community college called Cypress College in Southern California. I guess that's interesting.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. Okay, so you know, I have like watched your videos, Jason, your like PowerPoint presentations on your own channel, right? Like on divine command theory, and basically there are like two types of divine command theories, right? Right, one is like normative divine command theory, and another is meta-ethical divine command theory, right? And the normative one says there is only one normative principle, and that is we should all obey God's commands, right? That's what normative divine command theory says, right?
Yeah, so maybe a slight change. It's one supreme normative principle. There could be, I don't want to say there couldn't be other normative principles, but any other normative principles are going to depend upon this one supreme one,
Okay.
right? Yeah. So, it's probably also relevant that we're concerned here with uh, normativity in the sense of deontic uh, moral value. So maybe there is
Yeah,
normativity that doesn't have anything to do with moral obligations, but
yeah,
let's
yeah,
confine ourselves to be talking about obligations. On normative
yeah.
divine command theory, there's one supreme principle from which all obligations follow, and that supreme principle is God is to be obeyed.
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. And then the meta-ethical divine command theory says moral obligations are identical to God's commands.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And yeah, you can think of it as a meta-ethical divine command theory is giving a kind of analysis of what moral obligations are. What is a moral obligation? Well, on meta-ethical divine command theory, it is a divine command. So obligatoriness just is divine commandedness. If that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Okay, okay. Like so in meta-ethical like divine command theory, right? One of the things that I've heard from the famous Christian nationalists, like say like Andrew Wilson or like Doug Wilson or something, they seem to claim that morality is grounded in the morality is grounded in, I guess I'll just let like Andrew say for himself what he believes in. Let me screen share. Um, okay, so sharing my screen now. This is like Tim Pool's chat with him. I'm going to share my audio too. This is Tim Pool's chat. Okay, so can you see the screen, Jason?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So this is Tim Pool. Do you know Tim Pool?
I've seen him. He's easy to recognize because of his hat.
Yeah. So ignore Tim Pool. He's a fool. He's an ignorant fool. We are going to just look at Andrew Wilson. So this beanie guy is the Tim Pool, right?
Yeah.
This beanie guy, he's Tim Pool. Um,
Hmm.
and this person, he's Andrew Wilson. He's the Christian nationalist, right?
Okay. Hmm.
So okay, so let's see their conversation. He basically, like Andrew Wilson, I think he, like, in brief, he says like he's basically divine command theorist, and he's going to talk about like human rights and what he thinks about them, right? Okay.
Means that you have it. So, like,
An
okay,
entitlement to speak.
yeah. So if you have a right to own a gun,
To speak.
no, hang on, let me finish. If you have a right to own a gun, do you have a duty to own a gun?
What do you have a duty to speak?
No, you don't
start
have a
with the
duty
First
to
Amendment.
speak.
If you have a right
Oh.
to vote, do you have a duty
So
to
you
vote? The
so
answer
right,
is
so
yes.
it'd be an
That's
entitlement.
that's your argument.
It's an entitlement,
But
absent a duty.
but you can speak.
Yeah, you can.
And so
Until you can't.
The question
Until somebody stops you with force.
so you're talking about government restrictions are made up by
No,
us as a people.
Just people can adhere to your rights without any form of government. If you're walking down the street and you speak, and a guy turns around and smacks you in the mouth and breaks your jaw, right? He has now used force against whatever this right you think you have to speak. You have no right to do shit except whatever you can enforce.
Right.
Your mechanism is force, and the mechanism against you is force.
And so
all rights are is force.
You're talking about government protections, not rights.
No, I'm talking about rights. What is a right?
So
What is
it is an intrinsic moral function
Well, okay,
or
intrinsic meaning what?
meanings. If again, I'll try to explain. If you're born and you live in the middle of the woods, there are things you can do. You can hunt for food. You can defend yourself. You can speak freely. Now, what we've done in the United States
Unless
is
you're born blind and you can't talk, right? Then where does your right to speak come from?
you lack the ability to speak,
Right.
but you still have the means by which you are allowed to do it.
Yeah, but what makes it an intrinsic right to be able to do? Like, where does this idea come from other than you axiomatically kind of just
Evolution?
say, you say because I can do something, I have the right to do something?
It's part of a evolutionary biological structure
So
that
if I-
resulted in the survival of humanity.
So if I like grab a spear and I can stab somebody with it, I have a right to?
No, that's
Why?
that's attacking
different.
somebody. That's
Yeah,
violating.
but other
that's a
than
whole
an
bunch-
axiom of you shouldn't do that because I just don't feel like you should, what makes it intrinsic that I don't do that?
Yeah, so you just saw, Jason, you just saw like when like Andrew talks about like rights and like axioms, right? So um he thinks like these axioms, like he doesn't seem to believe in like these self-evident like principles or like axioms, right? Like these like more moral like axioms, like these so that's like, I guess, one piece of like even like in this whole conversation. um One of the things that happens is like this Tim Pool is like talking about like philosophy and stuff, and Andrew, given his like divine command theory, he's like challenging this view of like what grounds rights, right? What grounds like these rights or like duties, right? Like, is it like some axiomatic thing, right? Is it just like something that is self-evident, right? Like a more moral intuition. Now moral intuitionism is basically an epistemology, right? When you think like I have a right to not be killed, right? The people who believe in like robust moral realism, right? Or like who believe like in moral facts, they would say that this statement, I have a right to not be killed, that 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 is showing that is showing like moral fact, right? It's a statement of moral fact, right? um and and these like atheists can think like these atheists and even theists can think like these moral facts are like platonic, right, entities, right? Like platonic objects, um I guess, right? There are some like moral naturalists who are like I mean, generally, moral naturalists are likely to be more like consequentialists, but I'm like, I think deontology works well with like moral, um, a non-naturalist kind of like Platonic view, right? So Andrew basically asks like what grounds these rights, and like the moral Platonist, right, like the robust moral realist would just answer like they just exist, right? Full stop. Full stop, right? There is no
Hmm.
extra grounding, right? They are not grounded in anything else. The wrong making property of violating rights is just there, right? When you kill someone, um, when you violate their rights, that the wrong making property is there, right? In that incident, in that event, or in that action, right? There is nothing that grounds that. It just is there, right? Um, what would like a divine command theorist say about rights in your view?
Um, okay, so uh, you said a lot of things, and Andrew Wilson said a lot of things, and some of what you said I agree with. Some of what you said needs to be kind of developed a little bit more. With respect to what Andrew Wilson said, what was interesting to me is that he wasn't, I didn't hear him articulating a divine command framework. He was suggesting that unless you can enforce a right, you don't actually have the right, which is a weird kind of view, which means I don't have the right to speak unless I can use force to enable myself to speak. That's an odd view because in that case, if someone prevents me from speaking, meaning I don't have the ability to use force to enable myself to speak, then I guess I don't have the right to speak on his view. In any event, what he's saying here is not necessarily the divine command view. So, but your question was about what would a divine command theorist say about rights? So one thing is that divine command theory, as it is typically defended, at least in in the pages of philosophy journals and other academic publications, is most commonly presented as a theory about moral obligations or deontic moral value. That is, uh, you know, things actions we should do and should avoid doing. And rights are connected to that, but rights are a different moral phenomenon than obligations. So that's one thing. And again, divine command theory is primarily a theory of obligations. So a divine command theorist, I don't know that um, I'm not certain that there's a single divine command theorist uh, view about rights. I suspect that different theorists could have slightly different views. But what they are going to say is, what they're probably going to say is that, well, rights entail obligations. Um, so that because if I have a right to speak, say, then everyone else has a negative obligation to refrain uh, from trying to interfere with my exercise of that right. And so, at least at least in some ways, or to some extent, rights are going to consist of divine commands. Now, why am I being cagey about this? Well, partly because I think rights are probably more than merely, at least in the minds of some, rights are probably more than merely the existence of negative obligations. Um, if that's all they are, if rights are only negative obligations, in other words, my right to freedom of expression merely consists in the fact that other people have an obligation to uh, prevent me from speaking, or sorry, an obligation to refrain from preventing me from speaking, then the divine command theorist says, well, yeah, your right to freedom of speech consists in divine commands, because obligations consist in divine commands. But if you think that rights involve more than merely the negative obligation, then you're going to probably have a different analysis. So, okay, I'll stop.
Yeah. Right. So I would say like yeah, and it's true that like right now Andrew has not like talked about like divine command theory, but I think he is like sort of hinting at that like even initially, right? Like with like grounding and stuff. But I guess oh yeah, you also probably don't know Andrew, so I guess you probably don't know his view. So let me sort of like play the video more.
Sure.
That you don't go and kill another person?
Yeah.
So the way I view rights would be things that, and again, there's a debate over what rights are.
Yeah, let's start with that. What are they?
No. So there, it's honestly difficult to define,
Yeah.
but it is certain moral structures or.
I would say axioms. Would you agree with that? Just an axiom. So like, you have inalienable rights from God according to the Constitution. This is an axiomatic principle. It means this is our like philosophical starting point, is that we have these.
I would put it as things that were required or greatly beneficial to the survival of an individual that we greatly benefit.
I agree. We benefit. I just don't know what makes them intrinsic, or like you're born with them or something like this, other than we just kind of agree to it.
So I think the restrictions we kind of agree to. And some people might view some things as rights and other things not as rights. Mm-hmm. Like the left thinks healthcare is a human right, which makes literally no sense.
No sense.
But in terms of your ability to speak, you can walk around, you can speak. To defend yourself, you can pick up a stick, you can defend yourself.
This goes back to the same argument. I can grab a spear and murder somebody. I can do that. Why don't I have a right to do that?
Because you are now causing harm to another person, which is a detriment.
But why is that valuable?
Why are other people valuable?
Yeah, well, why would that be an intrinsic value? So, like, I can
one would result in the end of humanity, and one results in the expansion of humanity.
Well, no, both can result in the expansion of humanity.
Right, but absolutely not. You're completely wrong.
No, I'm completely right.
You are wrong. Self-defense can result in expansion of humanity if you're using destruction for the purpose of ending something that is destructive. Mm-hmm. But if you are wantonly going around murdering people, you're actively reducing and harming humanity.
Well, okay, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't expand humanity by harming people. There's
so
nations
the argument
that do
of
this all the
self-defense
time.
is there are things that we believe we must be able to do for the betterment and survival of humanity.
Yeah, but when I'm asking you this question, right, I'm asking the foundation from which you say, I have the right to speak or write.
We need to be able to in order to survive.
You because you need to do something.
So
I'm not sure how that means you have a right to it, though.
Okay, so speech is not
like you
just
have to
saying
eat.
words.
You have a right to eat?
Yes, 100%.
Really? You have a right to do that?
Why would you?
Yes,
not
you don't have a right to own.
So
food,
if I have,
but you have a right to eat, otherwise you'll die.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Do you have a right to breathe? What about breathing?
Well, these are good questions. Right?
Again, I don't think you.
I mean, it's a bit derailed the conversation, like a bit like brain rot conversation, right? Like,
yeah.
It's like he doesn't seem to like directly get to the like his objection to rights, you know. So, I guess I'm sorry that you have to sit through this brain rot, but
yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
But yeah, I like this is just like 16-minute clip. I wanted you to like just like get his full view, I guess. That's why like I'm playing this like whole video, I guess. It's not that like we are already at like 5 minutes already. So
okay.
I'm sorry again for this brain rot. Going to play the video again.
Understand we're talking about intrinsic behaviors that are required for survival versus the government and humans deciding what we shouldn't have.
I don't think we're speaking past each other. I'm asking what makes them intrinsic. When you say I have a right to eat, okay.
If you don't, you'll die.
If you have if that guy has all the food over there, you no longer have a right to eat.
We're not talking about your right to steal from others. If you are standing in the woods if you're standing in the woods by yourself, eat that mushroom.
Okay, got it. You can eat the mushroom. But what makes it a right to eat that mushroom, and what makes it not a right for guy standing next to the mushroom to say, I have a gun and I don't want you to eat that mushroom?
You're now once again talking about laws and restrictions.
Yeah, okay, but my whole theory is that rights themselves are force, And that's all they ever are. It's just your ability to use force to do thing you want to do.
I think you're just making
you call that a
right.
right.
I call rights things that are essential to the survival of humanity.
So you have a right to your heart beating and your blood flowing and to blink and to...
Yes.
Okay, so if you
so
just...
now you misunderstand because once again, you're talking about government again.
How is this government? It doesn't need to be government.
If you are standing in the middle of the woods and your heart is beating, your heart has a right to beat. If your heart fails and you die, you died. If you're making an argument that someone should or should not be allowed to do something is an entirely human social construct.
I agree.
Right. I'm saying that the reason we have protections of rights is because we've determined certain things are required for the reasonable survival and expansion of humanity.
I agree. We agree to those things, and we act as though they're rights.
And the Bill of Rights,
but I don't think rights themselves exist.
The Bill of Rights is a recognition of certain things that we do for the betterment of survival that must be protected from government. Now, if you want to argue the amendments in the Bill of Rights are nonsensical, fine. If you want to have a moral argument or philosophical argument about what is required or intrinsic to the survival of humanity, by all means have that argument. But rights do exist. It just means some you might not agree with and some you might think aren't. Those are philosophical debates.
Yeah, but when you say exist, right? Do you mean outside of your brain they exist, or do they only exist as a construction of your mind where you say, I have a right to do X?
If we observe creatures in the wild, we will see them required to do things to survive.
Yeah, okay, so...
If you inhibit those things, they will die.
So if just rights
protect
to you...
those things...
So the rights to you just mean things which are a requirement for your existence?
And typically we define them as such because they transcend the basic obvious things like breathing and drinking water.
Owning a gun isn't a requirement to your existence.
No, defending yourself is.
Yeah, but
if a bear comes near the middle of the woods...
Yeah, so by the way, Tim didn't answer whether they are just in your mind or just external. Because if he said the rights are something external, I think that would imply he's leaning toward moral realism. If he said it's just in the mind, I guess that would mean he's sort of either a subjectivist or a kind of... I mean, relativism is a bit different. It requires a more group of people, right? So
Yeah.
So Andrew pretty much is let me see, where does he...
I think that you can say that everyone has these rights, and it's a function of whether or not their government allows the rights to be recognized.
That's the contention.
So,
when you say, I think everybody has...
Based on existence.
Which are true and correct.
Which you call rights, really are just force. You're saying, I will use force in order to do this thing that I want to do to necessarily exist. And that another person can use force to stop those things from existing.
And then you can use force to stop them.
Right, and then you can use force, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
but all we're really doing is just moving the goalpost of force around, right? So if this group says this group does not have the right to breathe, they do not have the right to eat, they do not have the right to do any of this shit, and they go and put a stop to it,
but you don't,
what are we appealing to for why it is that you can't do that?
That group doesn't have the right to do that.
But I would use a justification of God. And I would appeal to something which is unchanging and an unchanging standard for moral justifications for oughts. But
yeah, this is the jackpot, right? This is the point where he for 10 minutes it's all just brain rot, right? And then there's the jackpot, right? Now he's talking about divine command theory, or basically God being justification. I mean, I guess even some of the moral realists would say, theistic moral realists would say morality is grounded in God's nature or something. So I guess that's one thing. I think we are going to talk about both, where one theist would say God, morality is grounded in God's nature, and another view which is just the metaethical divine command theory, which is moral obligations are identical to God's commands, right? So let's focus on Andrew's view. I'm going to play this again, this jackpot clip.
I would use a justification of God, and I would appeal to something which is unchanging and an unchanging standard for moral justifications for oughts. But what you're doing when you say a right, and you're appealing to like the Constitution, that's postmodernist subjective standards of nonsense, right? It's just like
No, it's moral
we all
foundation.
decided that we have these rights, so we do. There's no justification for any of them.
So
Zero.
you don't believe in any intrinsic moral foundations?
No, I do believe in intrinsic moral foundations and epistemic justifications and ontological justifications, which would come from God.
I think you're doing deconstructivist reasoning to argue why.
This is just basic philosophy. It has nothing to do with deconstruction or postmodernism. Basic philosophy, you have to have a justification for a position.
And when I've given you one, you just reject it every
Yeah,
time.
well,
You just say,
because
nope,
because
nope,
they're axiomatic. So you haven't demonstrated why the axiom or the starting point. We start with rights, Andrew. You haven't demonstrated why we do, other than because I observe that if we don't act in this way, you expire. But it's like, okay, but why is that even bad? Like, why is that even a bad thing?
Why is it bad that humans cease to exist?
Yeah, why would that even be a bad thing from the worldview of rights? Like, oh, okay, if you don't have this right, you die. But you haven't justified why that's even a bad thing.
Because humans exist through a pattern of evolution towards, or creation, whichever you decide, for to be fruitful, to bear fruit, and etc. These things are components of creation and life. I think this aligns perfectly with like a Christian, Judeo-Christian moral worldview. And I think these things are requirements for the efficient expansion and fruitfulness of humans. So they are natural. Either from an evolutionary standpoint, humans developed to inherit certain requirements to function efficiently, and when these things are curtailed, we see inefficiency and collapse, disease and chaos.
This is circular. So you go, okay, we need to bear fruit and multiply. Why? Well, because then we can exist. Why do we need to exist? Because then we can bear fruit and multiply. Okay, but why? Because then we can exist.
You're just being contrarian for no reason.
No, it's not contrarian. I'm giving you a real principle.
You believe in God?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
So if I say God gives you a mandate,
Christian.
so when God says has a mandate to be fruitful and multiply, do you say yes or no?
Yeah, of course.
Are there certain characteristics and behaviors that result in benefit and in more efficient, fruitful multiplying?
Of course.
That's
divine? But this is divine command. Justification from divine command has nothing to do with libertarian nonsense of constitutional egalitarianism.
I think instead of having a discussion on the merits of what rights might mean, you're instead upset over what libertarians think rights might mean, as opposed to what I'm actually trying to say.
Okay, well, do you justify rights as coming from God?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, then we're fine there. But so I think we actually agree. So then if that is the case, if whatever you think rights are come from God, then whatever else we're appealing to external to God for where a right comes from isn't really a right, right? It's not really a right.
I think that life, goodness, creation, there is deep overlap. I think a simple way to look at it is, yin yang, within good there is some evil, within evil there is some good. Mm-hmm. And a way to explain that is sometimes we have to destroy to create. What does that mean? If there's a mass murderer who's murdering children, we unfortunately, that are beneficial to mankind.
Right here, where we come to this agreement, where I reject this, is that I think all the things you just stated are duties. They're duties, they're the opposite of rights. You have a duty.
I just think we're having a semantic argument.
Well, but semantics are super important so we don't speak past each other. So when I say a duty, it's an obligation to do a thing based on the fact that you're commanded to, in this case by God. A right, I would say, is an entitlement absent duty. So if that's the case, what you're listing out is like God is giving us these duties to do. I'm not sure what rights he's giving you.
I'm saying there are certain behaviors that...
All right, so you saw all that, right? Basically, like I played that long clip because I wanted you to see the kind of stuff that right wing guys are doing right now on the internet, and like these guys are like really popular, by the way. These Christians, right? Like he gets thousands of views, right? Andrew Wilson, Tim Pool, millions of views sometimes. On YouTube, on like TikTok, and like these sorts of places. So, anyways, like, what did you think of what Andrew was saying so far? Right. Well, what did you think?
Eventually he gets to what is the divine command theory. At first he wasn't saying things that were consistent with that, but yeah, that it's pretty clear that his view is divine command theory. Duties are grounded in divine commands. Yeah. So that's a bad view. That's a bad moral view for reasons that I think Plato explained 2,500 years ago. But yeah.
Yeah, so like what would we, how would you object, right? What would be your objections to Andrew?
Well, so there's the objection that I raised in the papers that you mentioned at the beginning. Um, and then there are other related objections. Um, but we can at least, before we get into a lot of detail, I guess I could just give it an outline. So, divine command theory is the view that um, moral obligations, are grounded in divine commands. If a person has an obligation to do X, that is grounded in a divine command that the person do X. Now, grounded in is a difficult uh, relation. It bears a lot of analysis, but we can, I think, get past the concerns one might have about what grounding is or what it means and just talk about identity. So, the view that we can consider is a view according to which a moral obligation just is, it's identical with a divine command. So when a person has the obligation to do X, that's identical with that person being commanded by God to do X. So there, it's one and the same thing. Obligatoriness is divine commandedness. Um, okay, so what are the objections? Well, on that view, um, it looks like God doesn't have reasons um, for his commands, and we can get into why this is. Right now, I'm just giving an outline. And if he has no reasons for his commands, then his commands are arbitrary, but something arbitrary can't ground something important. Moral obligations are important, so moral obligations cannot be based in something arbitrary. Right? Moral obligations can't themselves be arbitrary. Since divine commands are arbitrary, moral obligations can't be uh, arbitrary divine commands. Um, so that's one, arbitrariness. Another objection would be the um, concerns about contingency. So uh, some uh, some statements about obligations are necessary, and that just means they could not be otherwise. They could not be false. So consider the statement, you are obligated to refrain from torturing human infants uh, gratuitously or for no reason other than your own pleasure. And that seems to be necessary. It couldn't be otherwise. That is true in all possible worlds. It couldn't be false. Um, but if God is all powerful, then he can do anything, including issue any command whatsoever. So while, of course, he can command that we not torture infants, he can also command that we torture infants. Um, so if he commands that we torture infants, then torturing infants is obligatory. So it's possible that torturing infants is obligatory if divine command theory is true, right? So let me say that turn that around. If divine command theory is true, then it's possible that it's obligatory to torture infants gratuitously. But of course, it's not possible that it's obligatory to torture infants gratuitously. Therefore, um, uh, divine command theory has to be false. Now, there's actually sort of two concerns here. I think that's important to separate. One is just the idea that um, some moral claims are necessarily true, whereas because God's all powerful, he could command anything whatsoever. And so, no, on divine command theory, no moral claim would be necessarily true. But the other is that divine command theory has these counterintuitive implications. Um, right? it is counterintuitive to suggest that morality would be uh, contingent, that all moral claims would be contingent rather than necessary. But there's more specific counterintuitive possibilities, including the possibility that something as horrible as torturing infants is obligatory. So I think I've raised three different objections. There are others, but I think this is a good place to start. So there's arbitrariness, there's the general problem of contingency, and then there is the problem of um, sometimes called the problem of the horrible command, but you can also think of it as the problem of specific possibilities, specific counterintuitive possibilities, such as that it's possibly obligatory to torture infants. Okay. So again, that's just an outline of objections to divine command theory.
Yeah, yeah, like arbitrariness and contingency and counterintuitive implications. I also saw, like, in one of your presentations, you also talk about morality being normatively irrelevant.
Right. That has to do with God's reasons and on divine command theory, his lack of reasons. It's not clear that this is something we should go into in more detail, but it looks like there's an issue with God having reasons for his commands. I mentioned that earlier. Um, and if that's the case, then uh, his commands cannot uh, provide reasons for us. Again, something that's arbitrary can't be important. Something that's arbitrary can't give us reasons. And so if God's commands are grounded in uh, nothing, if they are arbitrary, then they can't give us reasons, and hence anything that flows from his commands are irrelevant, normatively irrelevant. They don't have anything to do with reasons, and therefore they don't have anything to do with what we should do, given that what we should do is a function of what we have reason to do.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also like one of the things I thought, like, God already has reasons. It's basically those reasons that are doing most of the work. Now, some divine command theorists like appeal to like God's nature, right?
Hmm.
Um, God will not issue horrible commands because his nature is perfect.
Yeah.
It's loving or something, right? So how would you like think about that? Like object to that, basically.
Yeah. So this is I think the first. Well, I don't want to say the first, but one paper that was very influential um, was a paper called A Defensible Divine Command Theory by Edward Waringa, published in the late mid to late 70s. I want to say 77. I'm not sure about that. And he considered the possibility that raised, and that is the possibility of God issuing a horrible command. And his example was God commanding one person to pummel someone else, beat them up, beat them severely. Uh, and what Warriga says is, well, God is loving, and so he wouldn't do that. Now, it's important that it's not just that God is loving, but that he's essentially so. To say that he's essentially loving is to say that there's no world in which God exists in which he is not loving. And so, if that's the case, then there's no world in which God issues such a horrible command. And that would apply also to the example I gave of the command to torture infants. If God is loving, he wouldn't do that. And since he's essentially loving, there's no possible world in which he does that. Um, okay, so there's a couple different ways to reply to this. I sometimes call this move that Waring made famous, the appeal to love. So there's a couple different ways to appeal to respond to the appeal to love. One is to point out the difference between the arbitrariness problem and the uh, problem with contingency and counterintuitive possibilities. Um, so it's the latter things, the problem of contingency and counterintuitive possibilities um, that concern uh, the possibility that God issues this horrible command. Um, not directly, that's not directly implicated with the arbitrariness problem. The arbitrariness problem is the problem of God having or lacking reasons for his commands. And the mere fact that God has some essential characteristic doesn't show that any command that flows from that essential characteristic is grounded in reasons. So that's important. And we can see this if we imagine a deity who is um, divine or godlike, but doesn't have this loving nature. So imagine a being that has the opposite, has a hateful nature, and suppose he has that essentially. Well, in every world he has that. And so in every world, I mean, his commands are going to be things like, torture infants or, pummel your best friend, right? Punch your best friend in the face once a week or something like that. And these commands are going to flow from his essential nature, but surely the fact that they flow from his essential nature doesn't mean that he has reasons, that there are reasons for those commands, right? So again, what this shows, and I have another example which shows the same thing. What this shows is that that something comes from someone's essential nature doesn't show that a command comes from someone's essential nature doesn't show that that command is grounded in reasons. So my other example that shows this too would be an example of a kind of sexist or racist discriminatory act. So when a hiring manager refuses to hire someone because of their gender or their race or ethnicity or religion, that is a prototypical example of arbitrary discrimination, right? So it's arbitrary because it isn't grounded in good reasons. And we can get into there's more to say about that. We can get into that if you want, um, but notice that the racist or sexist hiring manager has a motive. Right? The reason they didn't hire Sally is because she's a woman. Uh, so now if we imagine a being that's, godlike, and has as its essential nature, as part of its essential nature, sexist motives, sexist inclinations, well, this being will always do sexist things, will always be motivated to do sexist things, but that doesn't mean that the sexist acts are right. They're still arbitrary, right? Even though they stem from something that is in the being's essential nature. Okay, so that's one thing to say, is that the appeal to love does not at all touch, it doesn't even come close to touching the issue of arbitrariness. The second thing to say, and this is closer to the point I made in the articles that you mentioned, is that, well, it may be true that it's impossible that God issues one of these horrible commands, but we can imagine a different being. We just did, a being that is divine-like, is omnipotent and omniscient, but unlike God, is not omnibenevolent, is instead omni-malevolent. So forget about the sexist divine being. Let's just focus on the malevolent divine being. That's not an inconsistent thought that there is such a being or that there could be such a being. A being that is omnipotent, omniscient, the creator of the universe, and omni-malevolent, suppose essentially so. Well, since the being is omnipotent, this being, and in the article, I think I call the being Asura. I'm not sure about that, or Yod. Let's use Yod, Y-O-D, instead of God. Um, uh, Yod is essentially omnimalevolent, um, and Yod, since he's omnipotent, has all the same powers that God does. Well, among God's powers is the power to create obligations by command. Well, since Yod has all the same powers that God does, Yod has the power to create obligations by command. And so when Yod issues the command to torture infants gratuitously, then that's an obligation, according to divine command theory, right? So my point was that divine command theory is postulating a power, the power to create or establish obligations via command. But when you think about that power, you realize that it implies the existence of that power. If it is a real power, it entails that it's possible that torturing infants is obligatory because while it doesn't require that God issues this command, the point is that some other being who is also omnipotent could issue the command, right? And the appeal to love doesn't touch that, obviously, because the appeal to love is about God's character, not about the character of other omnipotent beings. So so there's 2 points again to the um, response to the appeal to love. One is that it doesn't even touch the arbitrariness concern, and the other is that it doesn't really solve the contingency problem or the counterintuitive possibilities problem precisely because it doesn't, or sorry, because it's still the case that divine command theory entails the existence of the power to create obligations via command, and so when we consider beings other than God, we realize that obviously divine command theory it still entails possible that torturing infants gratuitously is obligatory.
Right, that was very in depth. That was fantastic. So the thing with like, I always thought this, right? So historically, one of the issues for like a large amount of Christians and Muslims, and I guess even Hindus, right? Basically, every religious theist is the problem of interpretation of the commands, right?
Mm.
Like, like how strictly should we interpret this, right? Or how loosely should we interpret this command, right? Because someone like Aquinas, let me show the screen. Like someone like Aquinas believed like heretics should be killed, right? Aquinas believed that. Um, on heresy, this is Aquinas. Let me also like bring in John Calvin, because John Calvin was also pretty brutal in like in his interpretation of commands. So I guess the issue here is like obviously like it seems obviously hard to interpret, um like modern Christians, Jason, like, so Andrew, I listened to like more of his chats, like talks with other people, and he was like directly asked, like does he believe in um, anti-blasphemy laws, right? Like punishment for blasphemy, state punishment. Um,
Mhm.
and Andrew said, like, I'll just play this video, but just a second, let me sort of find John Calvin. I had that bookmark. Let me see, where's that? Oh, I think I found it. Um, yeah, okay, I found his quote. Great, fantastic. Found John Calvin and Aquinas on heresy. Okay, so and I also got Andrew Wilson's video. Like he calls himself like a Christian nationalist. Um, so let me share my screen here. Okay, this one. I think this one. So here's the point. Here's the specific point where they talk about and blasphemy. Right, they talk about blasphemy laws. Yeah, this is the one. This I think the
Reject it
one.
and turn on it and attempt to destroy it to the best
Why?
of my ability, because free speech is prime. That's my
Yeah, so
fundamental
so
axiom.
if a guy's
The
going down the
exchange
hang on.
about-
Can you hear? By the way, can you hear them speak?
Yeah. Yes, I
Okay.
can.
Okay, great.
All right,
ideas.
no.
Let's mark the principle. Yes,
We're going
child
through
porn,
this.
bad.
No, fuck that.
Regular
fuck that.
porn, I'm okay with. I think I'm
So-
okay with banning regular porn.
So
at this
if a
point.
guy's riding down the street
naked,
and he has the FM radio on, you don't think that the FCC should be allowed to say that you can't have like racial slurs bumping on an FM radio? You don't think that they should be allowed to censor any of that for the purpose of decency?
in that example, no.
Okay, so then why is it that they should be able to censor pornography on television?
Wait, just regular porn?
Yeah.
Because that's not speech.
Why isn't it? It's freedom of expression, right?
Okay, here we go. This is your presuppositional nonsense.
This isn't pre-supping.
Hold on. Why isn't my
Don't
watch
ask me a question,
speech?
answer
Why
my
isn't my
question.
watch speech? Because
Don't
it's going to go,
ask
oh, well,
a
how do you
question,
know
answer a
that? You
question.
have to abide by a first principle.
No, I'm not getting into first principles. I'm literally just asking for consistency.
Here's why.
If it is the case that the
It's
FCC,
self-evident. It's the exchange
oh, it's
of
axiomatically
ideas.
self-evident.
Right.
What's self-evident about that? European nations
can't
have
answer that
porn
question.
playing. European nations have
Have
porn
what?
playing. European nations, you can watch softcore porn right on your television during daytime TV.
Okay, we're talking in principle right now. I don't care what other countries are doing. In principle.
Okay, in principle.
I believe that it is absolutely essential that people be allowed to exchange ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
Watching people have sex is not an exchange of ideas. Now you say, how do I know that? Exactly where do you draw the line?
Okay.
It's like saying,
So-
what's the difference between the color blue and the color purple? Exactly where do you draw the line at when blue becomes
Got it.
purple? It's
So
a continuum.
So as long as it's on the FM radio waves and they're just reading hardcore porn, that's okay?
That's better than showing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's okay. You wouldn't censor that.
I don't know. It's
You don't know?
It's
You
case
don't
by
know?
case. Yeah, it's case. Okay, hold on. Do you agree there's a difference between like nudity in art and then pornography?
Yeah.
There's a lot of Christian art that has nudity in it.
I just said yeah.
Okay, so how do you know exactly where the difference between art and pornography is?
The delineations and intent.
Go on.
That's it. The delineations and intent. When you're because you're trying to cite the Supreme
All right,
Court
let's-
when they're like,
Yeah, if
oh,
you know it when
I
see
know
it.
it when I see it. That's
Correct,
actually
which
was
is
a bad.
pragmatism.
It was actually a bad argument. The truth is that we do know it, and we know it through intent.
Okay, that's
Like,
my
for
lines.
instance-
What did you?
for
All right, fine.
instance,
That's
when-
how I know to ban porn when it's intent. When it's intent to just fucking appeal to people's basest instincts.
Yeah, but so is music. Music does the same thing.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
music,
it does.
I don't know how aroused you get when you listen to music.
Oh,
It's
okay.
certainly a
So you're
different
driving down
mechanism.
the street and you're
It's a different
bumping.
mechanism.
You're bumping. Oh, I got my GAT, my AK. I'm gonna go kill all these N-words over here, and then I'm gonna go call these
Correct.
bitches over there. Blah,
Protected
blah.
by free speech. Yes.
What's the intent there, though? What's the intent? What if these two people? Well, I mean, I don't care, right? Yeah, I want to ban
Okay.
porn. What if these two people? Well, I mean, I don't care, right? Yeah, I want to ban
Okay.
porn.
Okay.
I'm used. To
I genuinely
TikTok.
don't know.
I'm used to TikTok friendly language.
Yeah,
So
that's
anyway.
right. YT people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
heard that
so,
earlier
so-
today.
So the thing is like, if it is the case that two people say, well, we're having a sexual display, which is art. It's art. You can't clearly delineate intent if they're saying that.
Maybe if you
You know, it's interesting, but and like Jason, this is interesting, right? Like these people have been talking talking so much, for 5 minutes about just like porn or something on like TV or something, and like just public indecency. There is no talk about like heresy, right? There is no talk about like, hey, like should that Quaker dude, should that be like executed? Should he be punished? right? It's very, like modern Christians, when I see this Christian nationalist, when I see this person, he seems like a liberal, right? Compared to
Hmm.
someone like Calvin or Aquinas. And let me tell you, like he's going to this like Andrew, who calls himself like Christian nationalist, he's going to literally say, I don't want to make I don't want the state to punish blasphemy. He's going to say that. Let me sort of play the video again, but he's going to say that soon. I knew, and I've watched this video, right? I watched this video. I'm just like unable to find that specific point, but I did
Hmm.
watch this video, and it did it's in this exact video that he claims that he's cool with like blasphemy. He does not want the state to punish blasphemy. Let me sort of play that.
What's the intent? Is it anything
I
you're
don't know,
doing
you're
there
asking
that
a
has good
hypothetical.
intention? Is there anything good there that has
Yeah,
a good
could be.
intention?
Could be.
What?
About Muhammad.
Yeah,
It's to
what
say
about
fuck you to Islamism.
it? And can you do that in Islam countries?
No, you get killed for it.
No, you can't, right?
Do you,
No, you
do you
can't.
support that?
Well, I'm saying that if it is the case that
Do
they
you
can
support
govern-
what Islam did to Charlie Hebdo? Do you think that was an acceptable
I think that
response?
is in Islamic nations, if you believe in the sovereignty of men, and those men have constructed that nation under Islam, then you're going to have to obey their laws. I
That's
don't
a
have
different
to
question.
agree. Hang
Okay,
on.
so you okay?
Bro, you got to let me answer the fucking question.
Oh, okay. We're in debate
agree?
mode now, Andrew. Shut the fuck up.
Do I agree though that you should be able to regulate it? No, but I'm following a different ethical system.
Why
They
don't
will
you
kill
agree?
you. Well, they will kill you for drawing the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
Christians aren't going to kill you for blaspheming against Christ. You would get like a fine or some kind of like public
Okay.
decency charge or
And then
something
what-
like that.
Oh, and then we're back to Jordan Peterson 16 all over again. Okay, so let's say I draw a picture of Jesus.
Mhm.
Um,
By the way, I'm not for blasphemy laws. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
okay, well that's 12 minutes of my life that I just wasted. Why
I've
are you
never
not
been-
for that?
I've
okay,
never been.
Okay, well that's 12 minutes of my life that I just wasted. Why
I've
are you
never
not
been.
for that?
What? Like, couldn't he just say initially, right? Like just 3 or 4 minutes ago, he was talking about um um like Islam and like those theocratic countries, right? And how if you are there, you have to obey their laws. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, dude. I don't want to get killed. Of course, I will obey those laws. But couldn't he just just say that he is cool with he's cool with like he wants he does not want the state to punish blasphemy, right?
Hmm.
And even the interviewer is like annoyed for how long he took to just answer that, right? Like
Hmm.
so this is Andrew Wilson. Like I personally think he's like more um like I consider Andrew to be like these I don't know if you heard the name like Julius Streicher. Um, he was he was a have you heard his name, Julius Streicher?
I don't think so. I don't think I've heard it.
No, right? So
Not that
he
I know
was
of.
he was the guy who was a propagandist during Nazi Germany, and he was like executed in like Nuremberg trials. Um,
Okay.
he continuously created like anti-Semitic propaganda.
Hmm.
And he was charged with like crimes against humanity, like when Jewish people were getting like murdered in like gas chambers, concentration camp. Julius Streicher was like still like publishing anti-Semitic stuff continuously.
Mm.
He was still publishing anti-Semitic propaganda. And um like Andrew here, um like when you like see all his like work, like he's very like strongly against he's very strongly against like wokeness, as he
Hmm.
calls it, right? He's very strongly against like Marxism. He's also very
Hmm.
strongly against like liberalism, right? Like the normal milk toast liberalism, like your Democrats, right? In the United
Hmm.
States, he's from the United States, right? He's in the United States, so he's opposed, very strongly opposed to all that stuff. But when he's like challenged, I'm like, okay, it's like he explicitly calls himself a Christian nationalist, right? But when he's challenged on it, he sort of does this stuff, where like, hey, look, I'm actually not really in favor of anti-blasphemy laws, right?
Do you
And it's
believe him? Do you believe him about that? That he's not in favor?
I I actually don't believe like I mean, in this exact same conversation with PF Young, um, Andrew like says, like, if the right wing like integralists, right wing other Christian right wing nationalists, I think if they came to power and they basically did the anti-blasphemy laws, right? Like blaspheming Christianity now is illegal, brother. If they did that, like, Andrew would be like, I'm not going to fight them, I'm not going to oppose them.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so you are a fascist. So you are a
Mm.
fascist, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, um he has um I think you are probably familiar with real theology,
Yeah.
right? Like Ben Speed Watkins, right? Ryan Downey.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
there's also another atheist philosophy of religion channel named Digital Gnosis. He's Nathan Ormond,
Hmm.
from the UK. His channel
Yeah.
is like United Kingdom channel. Like the real theology are like Americans. Um,
Yeah.
and he just recently, just today, like literally today, had a conversation with Andrew, and
Mm.
it was as expected, a dumpster fire conversation, right? It was like basically, this debate, like loud debates, public live spoken loud debates. And like Andrew was like continuously very, I mean, it's like very intellectually very, annoying, I guess, right? Intellectually annoying. Like he wouldn't he wouldn't he wouldn't let Nathan like he would talk about, like, give me this fact, right? Like it's sort of like, so um I think there was a point where Nathan said, like, Thomas Sowell. I think you probably heard of Thomas Sowell, right? He's
Yeah.
a
He libertarian.
Yeah, he's a conservative economist, right? And
Hmm.
and Andrew told him to like find that specific quote. And I thought, well, it's obvious that Sowell would have said that, right? Like what Nathan said, it was obvious that Sowell would have said that already, right? But he
Hmm.
like, was during the debate, he was like literally asking, give me that exact quote. I thought, well,
Hmm.
I personally would have but I would have started searching. I personally would have started
Yeah.
searching, but I thought, well, like, look, if during the debate it would take like 10 or 15 minutes to just search that book, right? It's the book
Hmm.
by Thomas Sowell, like Basic Economics. That book is huge, right? 400,
Hmm.
500 pages. And I thought, well, look, if Andrew is like willing to stay silent for like 15 minutes, I mean, like, I
Hmm.
personally, if I was debating him, I would have told him, okay, look, I'm searching. While I search, would you please stay silent? Would you please let me search what you asked
Hmm.
for? Right? During the debate,
Hmm.
I would have halted that debate just there. I would have fact checked that, right? I would search that
Hmm.
fact. But I think Nathan at that time, I don't know, maybe he was like Nathan, like I did not watch the full debate because I woke up later and like the debate was already during the end point. But during the debate, like Nathan told me, like I asked Nathan, like, did you try the strategy of like fact checking Andrew on the spot while while you let the debate be halted, right? Like let him stay silent, let the audience experience that silence while you fact check, right? um so Nathan did tell me that he did try that strategy of fact checking just on the spot, but Andrew moved away from the topic and started like talking about something else, and like it was a very belligerent, very spiteful debate between the two.
Yeah.
So it's like um when when I see these when I see these sorts of debates, just a second, let me sort of share the screen again. So when I see these sorts of talks or chats, right, and I see, and you would see like in Nathan's comment section, like how Nathan was like destroyed in the debate or something, right? Like absolutely destroyed. And I would always think like, look, that doesn't seem like a very Christian way, right? Like it doesn't seem like you're going to convert people by doing that, right? You're not going to get converts by doing that. It's like entertainment, right? You're entertaining your audience, right? Like WWE or something, like wrestling stuff. And and so it's just a like um I basically like invited you like right now to sort of like how does a philosopher like actually look at like the epistemology or like the meta ethics that Andrew has, and his meta ethics is a mess, right? It's broken, it's unjustified, it's it's just unjustified, right? And yet this dude gets like thousands of views, right? Every
Yeah.
stream, like he does every stream, like I think every day or two or something, and he gets like large amount of views. He's very popular, right? And
Well, yeah, he's popular because he has people who agree with him, but he's also popular because he has people who disagree with him. Um, I'm sure that Nathan got a lot of views just because he had on Andrew Wilson, and Andrew Wilson's famous on YouTube, and so he's going to bring in a lot of views. And a lot of people are watching just to say, look at how stupid or look how ridiculous uh, Andrew Wilson is. Um, so, I mean, I don't know. I sometimes wonder about the value of engaging with this guy or people like him. Um, I don't think he really cares that much about how well um, defended or how rational or reasonable his views are. And I don't think he's interested in a genuine exchange of reasons, and I don't think he's open to being proven wrong. I could be completely wrong about all of that, and I haven't seen everything from him, but just in seeing him in these debates so far, it just seems like you're not getting much out of talking to this guy, other than,
yeah,
oh, people are going to watch.
yeah. Like he considers like everyone on the left to be like a worthless scum. Um,
Hmm.
consider
That's
them
not
consider
surprising.
them considers them evil, right? And like he, by the way, he's not like that particular like Christian. There is an ideology called Christian democracy that is like popular in like Europe.
Hmm.
um Christian democracy is like they all support like universal healthcare and like public transport, think of like, right wing, somewhat right wing version of like social democracy, right? Like universal healthcare, public transport, public education, they all support that stuff. But weirdly, Andrew doesn't, right? He does not support universal healthcare. It's like very
Yeah,
Americanized,
in the Tim Pool video, he said that the claim that people have a right to healthcare is literally nonsensical. Now, this is an example. It's obviously not nonsensical. We know what it means. We know what people mean when they say that people have a right to healthcare, um, or that it's wrong to deny people healthcare for any reason. But especially because they're poor. But to Andrew Wilson, it's nonsensical. Now, that can't be what he really thinks. He can't really think it's nonsensical. So this is just an example of why I don't think he's really interested in understanding. I don't think he's really interested in, I don't know. But what's important isn't him. He's not important. What is important is his view, right? And he is, from what I can tell, a divine command theorist, and divine command theory is a bad view. And that we can talk about that without having to talk about him.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one thing I do, Jason, is like I like this work for me, this channel, this YouTube channel for me is not just like purely philosophy, right? I don't know. Have you heard of like Joe Schmid, Majesty of
Yeah.
Reason? Yeah. So
Yeah.
his channel is like purely like philosophy, like very deep dives in like ethics. My channel is also like actually like much more, I guess, political too, right? Much more political too. Like I'm this work for me is like important because like all over the world, like fascism is like all over the world, fascism is rising, right? J.D.
Yeah.
Vance is like one of the like some kind of Christian nationalist in the.
Yeah. Well, that's so I don't I think that the reason I became interested in divine command theory and in the Euthyphro objection and that kind of stuff because I isn't just because I want to know the truth about that, which I do, so there's a philosophical interest, but also because it has a real effect on the world, because there are a lot of people who are divine command theorists who have a view that is in that ballpark. There are a lot of people, especially in the United States, but in other countries as well, who think that if God doesn't exist, then there's no morality. Dostoevsky puts this claim in the mouth of Ivan Karamazov. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. I think it's a horrible view. So yeah, I want to intellectually defeat the view in the sense of show it to be baseless. Show that there are decisive objections to it. And I think that is a philosophical project, but it's also a political project in the sense that it has an effect on society. Hopefully.
Yeah. I want to show you like a little bit more of from Andrew, like so you don't get the wrong idea from me. Like I I sincerely
Yeah.
believe that Andrew is a fascist, right? And
Okay.
and like that's why you notice that I did not like edit or like
Yeah.
I showed you long clips of brain rot. Okay, so I showed you
Yeah.
that long brain rot to like make sure that you don't get like I'm not trying to be dishonest and frame someone as a fascist, right? He seems to be doing that himself. Let me sort of show you a little bit more from him. Like just right now he claimed, right, that that he's not cool with blasphemy, and the interviewer like, you wasted my 12 minutes of my life, dude.
I've never been for blasphemy laws. I don't think that they're important. I think that ultimately, you stupid guarded pragmatists.
Why are you not for blasphemy laws? What would you tell Stephen Wolf?
Because I think ultimately,
You can hear his voice, right? Both of these interviewers. Okay, great.
if you're going to try to regulate language like that, then you're going to eliminate the idea of discourse altogether.
Correct.
That's problematic. However, I don't think that if you outlaw nude displays of art, that you're going to eliminate discord. Or you're going to eliminate,
I agree. That's why
you're going to eliminate discourse. Sorry, not discord.
Yeah, I agree. It's an easier line. Talking and exchanging ideas is categorically different than like nudity in any format. That's like a visual thing.
Well, I think that in order to convince people who are blasphemers not to blaspheme, you might have to engage in their blasphemy. You know what I mean? Like, just in order to have discourse, I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah, it takes one to know one.
So I think ultimately, you may
Jews all the time standing outside of an elementary school,
in order to kind of pass the agenda. I think I would be willing to. Like, I don't see the great societal harm here in doing that, one. And two, if it would create unity, then yeah, I would be for that type of restriction. But I would also say that fundamentally, I don't think that that's ever going to be the case, which seem to be all within the fundamentally in principle, I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's less effective of a strategy ultimately.
Okay, that's fair. Well, this is my point though. Well, yeah,
fundamentally in principle, I don't have a problem with it. I just think
kind of need everyone to stick together here.
Yeah. Fundamentally in principle, I support it. So if it becomes a unifier, then he understands why, and he would likely support it. So
yeah, it's the founding fathers' strategy with slavery. It's like, well, we really don't like it, but we kind of need everyone to stick together here.
I haven't seen many people, and I did read what Wolf said on this, and this was a while ago when I ordered the book. I'll have to go. Christian ethics and the idea of Christian nationalism. Same thing with saying we're a sovereign nation, we can have our own borders, we reject the idea of unfettered immigration, various things like this.
Yeah, so by the way, he's also like anti-immigration, like, but I guess anti-unfettered immigration. Like, he's against mass immigration, you know. So I mean, it's like, what does mass mean? I mean, it's not like I mean, mass immigration would happen in the sense of like, if one country is literally being in a civil war, or like being destroyed, being bombed or something, and a large amount of people immediately are escaping, like simultaneously, you are seeing enormous amount of people going from one place to another. I guess you could call that mass immigration, but that mass immigration is not like some random thing. It happened because of some actual horror happening somewhere, right? So I mean, it's like what does it even mean to be against mass immigration, right? It's like it's a strange thing to say, right? Like, mass immigration as in like are you going to do what? Like, are you going to let those people just die or something, those refugees or something? I mean, it's like, so again, all the right-wing stuff, you know, I mean, I would think like, you considering, like, you know, one of the things about Andrew, Jason, one of the things about Andrew I find is that he really focuses on like what he calls like degeneracy, right? Like stuff like LGBT rights, right? Like stuff like drag queens or something, right? Like trans people, transgender people, lesbian people or something, right? Gay people or something, and he's interested in like fighting the wokeness or something. And I would always think, you know, there's like, you can literally search on Google how many people are dying from starvation, like right now. You could search that on Google, right? And when you search that on Google, Jason, how many people are dying of starvation, right? It says approximately 24,657 people die from hunger and related causes each day. Each day. You think like a Christian should focus on that, right? Like
Mhm.
how people are like starving rather than like some minorities like trans people are like trans people are not like these billionaires, these most powerful people who have enormous amount of power and who are like in the who are like in some huge I mean like skyscrapers or something, right? Like they don't like own they don't own the United States or something, right? Like the amount of aggression I saw against like LGBT people, right? Like the amount of aggression against like some depressed Starbucks barista, queer barista, right, who was about to kill himself at night. Um, um, the anger against them by these conservatives, I would always think, there are more horrific things happening in the world than like a
Yeah.
queer Starbucks barista, you know.
Right.
It's not like people are dying from starvation, children are dying, like there's a like children in Palestine are being bombed and starved
Yeah.
to death, right?
Yeah.
You'd think you'd think that like Christians should really focus on that one much more, right? Even if they okay to make an occasional video video on like trans people or something, even if they want like I'm a left wing I'm a left wing person, left
Mhm.
wing Christian, so I fully affirm like LGBTQ rights, right? I think trans rights are human rights. Trans women
Mhm.
are women, right? Trans men are men. Um, and what I'm more saying is that like the focus of the right wing is so fundamentally corrupted or like distorted. It's like they're focusing on shit that it's just not that big, right? That's just not that important. Like,
Well, they think it is. I agree with you that it isn't. And it's an interesting question why they think it is, why the um, trans uh, Starbucks barista or the trans athlete is a bigger deal than the 26,000 people who are dying, 24,000 people who are currently dying of starvation, and that we live in a world where that can happen. We live in a world where people can own houses with 30 rooms, and yet 24,000 people die of starvation. That discrepancy should bother anybody, but it doesn't seem to bother some people as much as uh, two women loving each other or two men loving each other or a person identifying as something other than their assigned gender. I don't know. I don't know why they do.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
one of
I,
sorry, go ahead, Jason.
I have a friend who's an evangelical Christian, and he has these attitudes. I asked him once. I said, if you had a child, one of your children was gay and was getting married, would you attend their wedding? And he said no. And I said, that really bothers me to think that you would let that interfere with, knowing how important it is to the child that their parents be there, that you would let your belief about God's disapproval of it stand in that way. I don't understand it. Yeah, this same person would absolutely go to the wedding of his child who was a billionaire and had multiple houses with 30 rooms, right? I don't get it. But this is a person who also voted for Donald Trump, and that's another very mysterious thing. There's so much hypocrisy in the world. But right, the in this country, the United States, the ruling party, the Republican Party, is carrying out immigration raids in cities like Los Angeles. They're claiming that they're enforcing the law, and they brought in the National Guard to help protect the law enforcement officers. And yet, this is a party whose leader, who was elected president, is someone who's convicted of felony, someone who's been convicted of breaking a law and was about to go on trial for breaking other laws. So they care about the law? I don't see it. And furthermore, this guy, once he became president, on his first day in office, pardoned 1,500 people who took part in a violent insurrection, and many of them violently attacked police officers, law enforcement officers. So they don't care about law enforcement officers. Anyway, so there's the hypocrisy knows no bounds. So I completely sympathize with you about that.
Yeah. Jason, one of the things that I was just looking what liberal theorists, liberal historians have to say about fascism. What do they mean by fascism, right? What do they define fascism? And I also looked at what Marxists, right, actual Marxists, define fascism, right? And one of the things that Marxist Leninists, they define fascism as the most, you could say, the terroristic, most terroristic stage of capitalism, right? They define it's like capitalism at its most darkest, most chauvinistic, imperialist, colonialist, right? It's very, very, very horrific mode, right? Capitalism. Liberals define fascism differently. They are more they don't have this view, this theory of capitalism, right? So they generally talk about some they talk about they basically excluding capital. They do kind of talk about anti-socialist, anti-communist, and all that stuff that is there in fascism, in among fascists, but they do not, I think, center capitalism as with fascism, right? Robert Paxton, historian Robert Paxton, Jason Stanley. Jason Stanley left the left the United States recently. He said fascism is in the United States now. So Nathan Orman called Andrew a fascist, and he gave basically Jason Stanley's criterion of why Andrew is a fascist. Right.
He did this to his face?
Yeah, think Andrew was interrupting Nathan too much. I think Nathan said he was unable to speak, right? Andrew was continuously interrupting him, and it was just a dumpster fire of a debate, I guess. So but just looking at Andrew's channel, Andrew defended Jan 6th he called it a riot, right? It wasn't an insurrection. He called it a riot. It was just a riot. But the Black Lives Matter riots were worse or something. That's what he.
Well, even so, even if it was a riot, right? There were riots, supposedly riots in LA last week, and that required that the president call it the National Guard, but the president refused for hours to call it the National Guard when there was a riot, according to Andrew Wilson, at the Capitol, attacking the seat of government, or one of the seats of government of the United States. And also these rioters, all of them, many of them were attacking law enforcement officers violently, stomping on their heads, for example, and they were pardoned. So what is there to defend here? I don't understand. You say he defended January. There's nothing you're defending people who violently attack law enforcement officers. So that tells me you don't really care about law enforcement officers. So you can't defend Trump sending in the National Guard into LA because of a need to protect law enforcement officers. You don't care about law enforcement officers, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Andrew had a debate with like a liberal streamer, and in that debate, like the debate was about, was Jan 6 in 2021, was it an insurrection, was it an insurrection, right? And Andrew basically argued that it wasn't an insurrection, it was just a riot. And based on like definitions, like quibbling with definition, like Andrew was like giving like, look at this counter example of your definition, so your definition like blows up or something. But then I would think, well, look, every definition has certain counter examples, right? We don't have perfect definitions of stuff. There will
Mhm.
always be edge cases, right? Edge cases. And I think and Destiny asked Andrew what's his definition, right? To offer his definition. And Andrew said, that's not my burden. I don't have the
Mm.
burden of proof.
Yeah.
And I thought, come on, man, like you aren't
Yeah.
even comparing the two definitions. How are you doing that, right? Like,
Yeah.
how would you oppose something if you don't even have like how would you oppose a definition when you don't even have your own, like a better definition? That's my point, right? If you don't have equal or better definition, what's the point of quibbling with other person's definition, right? And he was just using that like, it's not my burden of proof, it's not my burden of proof, that's not my goal, like you are the one who is like. But like Andrew, like the issue with this whole talk about like burden of proof was like, look, someone gave something to you and you have objected. Now, you have objected with some reasons. If you don't say those reasons, right, so that like we can actually like carefully think about stuff, even in a debate,
Mhm.
right? It's just fucking rhetoric,
Well,
right?
it's very important. It's very important to distinguish between intellectual inquiry and discussion and conversation on the one hand, and debate on the other, because intellectual inquiry and conversation and discussion all have truth as their goal,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
debate doesn't have truth as its goal. Debate has winning as its goal, right?
yeah.
Whereas winning is defined as what? I don't know, right? Sticking it to the libs or whatever it is, right? Making the other person look bad, right? That's not a worthwhile goal, right? So debates are kind of pointless, especially with someone who's eager to do it, because again, if you're eager to do a debate, that means you want to win. Um, so conversation is good. Conversation with people you disagree with is good, but that is truth oriented. And in a conversation, if someone asks you a question about a relevant concept and asks you for a definition of that concept, you don't just say, well, it's not my burden. This is a conversation. We're trying to understand the truth.
Yeah,
It's our burden together.
yeah, right, right. It just felt like an absolute debate tactic kind of thing, right? It's like, come on, compare your definition with his definition, right? And Destiny had like this historical definition, Steve. Like, now I should mention, I'm not a fan of Destiny either. I
Mm,
think he's a Zionist. I'm not
mm,
really a fan of Zionists.
mm.
Like I'm not a liberal, right? I'm left wing, you know. I'm a Marxist, I
Well,
guess.
you could be a left-wing liberal. I mean, and
Yeah,
liberal
they're
covers a
center
lot of
left.
territory.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like there are like center left liberals, social democrats, social liberals. You know, you call them that. I call them that. Social democrats or like social liberals, and that's fine. He's a social liberal, Destiny, or a social democrat or something. He's center left, right?
Yeah.
So, but still, I actually don't like, you know, the. I guess, yeah, I guess I don't like, even center left. I don't like, because it's like, well, Kamala lost, okay? I mean, and it's like there should have been more left-wing candidate. What happened to like the left wing in your United States? I mean when I looked at like history of United States, what it did to like the communists and like socialists in the
Well,
past.
there isn't a socialist party in the United States. Um, I mean, there are socialist parties, but they have no political
Yeah,
and no really
that's
and they don't have political power. And even Bernie Sanders and AOC are not socialist in that sense. They're not communists, they're not Marxists.
yeah, they're not Marxists. They're not
But
Marxists.
but but one thing is, I'm not a political scientist. I don't know a lot about this, but I would say that if fascism is on the rise, and I unfortunately share your assessment that it is, the next step is that fascists are going to start embracing the term fascism instead of
Yeah,
running from it. Um,
yeah.
but the everybody who is not a fascist needs to work together,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, true, true. But I mean, I guess leftists have different objections. So, oh, I forgot saying this too. So they don't like one of the things like Andrew is like he's like an America first dude, right? Andrew Wilson.
Hmm.
He likes the America
Yeah.
first view, and like he's like anti-war, right? And whenever the conservatives and I mean and even liberals, I guess, whenever they say they are anti-war, but for some reason, for like after World War II, United States, whether Republican or Democrat, they have been United States had been conducting all sorts of unjust wars after World War II against communists and like brown people, I guess, for a long time. And I would always think like, why is it that these America First people, um, like, why is it that they don't think that their own party and even the Democratic Party were just constantly conducting wars? Why is that the case? And if you are America First, by the way, right? Let's consider this scenario. Iraq has oil. Iraq is going to nationalize their oil. If they nationalize their oil, you will get that oil more expensively. You will have to pay more
Hmm.
money. The United States has to pay more money to get oil from Iraq if they nationalize it. If you are America first, and there are ways to counter that nationalization so that you get that oil cheap, wouldn't you then like do everything for like you would be pro-war then, right? If you're America first in that situation, because you want that oil to be cheap, you want that cheap oil
Hmm.
from Iraq, right? So it's like
Yeah.
even their own ideology of America first sounds like it would be pro-war. Like, why wouldn't it be? Like, you are just America first. You don't have like this global rule, international order, rules-based order system where you want to say, where you want to argue that everybody prosper. You are like America first, and I'm like, well,
Right. It does seem that when the United States got involved in Korea and Vietnam and Iraq and other places, the president wasn't doing it primarily to help the people of Korea or Vietnam or Iraq. He was doing it because he thought this was a way of helping America. But
yeah.
so yes, that seems right. Um, is there a Canada first? Is that a thing? Canada first?
I mean, now I think it.
Now it
It
is
probably.
maybe because yeah. But I wonder. I've often wondered that. I mean, is there Mexico first? Or is this just an American thing? I don't know.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I mean, it sounds very belligerent to other countries, right? Like, no, my country first. I mean, couldn't they say fuck
Yeah,
off, dude? Like, fuck you,
yeah,
right? Like, couldn't they
yeah.
say that? And if you are America first, would you not want to like as I said, right? Like, if Iraq declines you to sell oil cheaply, right? And it says we are going to nationalize our oil, We are going to use that nationalized, oil to, serve our like public education, public health, right? Government healthcare, public transport, public roads. We are going to use that great money for our people, right? But United States is like, nah, we are going to kill whoever does that, and we are going to install our guys. I mean, the sold out, Iraqi brown people, I guess, who are like, yeah, we are capitalists, give us money. We are going to keep other people. We are going to let other people stay poor. Just give us a lot of money. And the point is more like, if United States gets more benefit from Iraq not nationalizing their oil, right? Because United States is paying few people, right, basically, and they are getting their oil very cheaply. So it would do that if it's America first, right? United States first. It's obvious that it would do that, right? So like even these conservatives, these isolationist conservatives, are seem to be confused, massively confused about what even America first actually entails. Like, why wouldn't it entail? Why wouldn't you kill a bunch of other country people, other country leaders, right? United States already, by the way, done a lot of horrible shit in South America too, you know, in like Middle East. If we are just talking about like Middle East and like Asia, right? Like Vietnam, Korea, and stuff. In South America, it did with like um, Chile, right? With Chile, it did that Pinochet, yeah, Pinochet, that fascist cunt, right? so so it did all that stuff, horrible stuff, like this. So were those conservatives not America first? Like it's sort of like so stupid, right? Their ideology is so broken, but yet people seem to keep believing that. This is why Jason, I actually, move towards far left and like more like, I don't know if free speech
Yeah.
works, man. I don't know if free speech works because people seem to be doing fuck nothing for 60 years.
Well,
Your country. Sorry,
well,
Jason. I have to.
no. Well, we're getting way out of my comfort zone in terms of what I feel like I know a lot about and can say something
I get it.
informative
I
about.
get it. I get it. That's fine.
Um,
That's fine. Sorry.
yeah.
I'm
It's-
more like I'm into politics, right? So I read all this stuff, like
yeah.
like there's a book called like the Jakarta method.
Mm.
It was published in 2020 by Vincent Bevins. It's a great book. I highly recommend you read that. It basically talks about history of United States and its anti-communist campaign
Mm.
throughout the whole world,
Mm.
and it's just brilliant. Yeah. So great. So I guess, one more small thing I guess I want to share. It's just related to like our philosophy of religion, by the way. So it's not like um, it's not something too political, right? It is religious stuff. So okay, I think I already told you about this, right? When John Calvin, when John Calvin talked about a heretic who denied Trinity, right? The heretic who denied Trinity. And John Calvin like literally believed and said, if he comes here and I have any authority, I will never let him leave the place alive.
Mm.
Right. So these old school Christians were like very brutal, right? Aquinas and John Calvin. And these I guess modern day Christians like Andrew Wilson seem to be very, I mean, much more liberal, at least right now, compared to like Calvin and Aquinas, right? I think this is Aquinas on heresy, right? Should heretics be tolerated? I think this is where he answers heretics should be killed. The Consequently, we should expel them rather than. Who is that? Where is that answer? Where's that answer? I think it's, oh, gotcha. There you go. But even be put to death. Wherefore,
So there can
forgers
be.
of money and evildoers are forthwith condemned to death by secular authority. Much more reason is there for heretics, as soon as they are convicted of heresy, to be not only excommunicated, but even put to death. Right. So it's like, well,
Let me offer something from a perspective of moral philosophy. So a moral nihilist thinks of the world as involving no value. There are no true moral principles. There are no instantiated moral properties. Nothing is good, nothing is bad. No act is right. No act is morally wrong. That's what a moral nihilist thinks.
yeah.
And it seems to me that a divine command theorist says, you got that right, but if God exists, he can make commands. Right? What a divine command theorist thinks is if you take God out of the picture, the world has no value. There's
Yeah.
nothing in the world that gives us any reason to want things, to not like things, to perform certain actions, to refrain from performing other actions. There's nothing in the world that provides such reasons. And nothing as the world is in itself. It takes something else external to the world to impose it on it. So the moral nihilist and the divine command theorist are really, really close. They conceive of the world as a place that's just completely devoid of value. And that means completely devoid of anything that provides us with reasons to desire things or to do things or to refrain from doing other things. That's an
Yeah.
impoverished view of the world.
Yeah. You also had interaction with like Frederick Chu, right, on divine command theory. Frederick.
I've written a paper in response to Frederick Chu, but it's not published.
Oh, it's not published.
But it was about he wrote a paper about defending metaethical divine command theory as against normative divine command theory.
Yeah.
And I've discussed stuff like this on Facebook with him.
Yeah, you discussed that stuff with him. Yeah. So Frederick Chu has like a paper where he defends like he's an annihilationist, so he's not a universalist, right? He's not a universalist Christian, and he defends like this paper. I showed this paper to like this paper is free, as whenever I immediately click and it just opens up. So I think this is open access paper, right? So I can share this one. So okay, you see the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that, I actually thought, what a shit paper, right? It's just like the reason I thought it was shit, it was terrible, is because like the so Frederick Chu argues that God gave us libertarian free will because ultimate responsibility is so valuable, right? Ultimate responsibility is a great good, right? Ultimate responsibility is a great good.
Mm-hmm.
We defend the ultimate responsibility solution against two major objections. And I thought like ultimate responsibility, it's like it's not like some it's so I always thought like who wants such a responsibility such that if they do wrong they go to eternal hell, right?
Yeah.
It's a strange kind of demand for power, Jason, right? Like if I sorry, let me share the conclusion too. Sorry, I too quickly stopped sharing the screen. Sorry, just a second. Okay, entire screen. So it's just strange to that someone would want the kind of responsibility, ultimate responsibility that would like open up the possibility that they are sorry. Frederick Chu is like an annihilationist, so he believes that God kills some people, right? Or like, I guess he'll just say like God let some people die, I guess.
He lets
Like
some people be
traditionally,
be annihilated, meaning go out of existence permanently.
yeah, cease to exist permanently, right?
Mm.
um and I always thought like that kind of responsibility, like right, the choices between like heaven and like death, I don't think like giving someone that choice, heaven versus death, like why are you even doing that? Is that a rational thing to do? And is that a loving thing to do to someone? It's like it's so stupid. It's so stupid, right? I always sometimes feel, Jason, like right-wing Christians are just writing papers to convince themselves or convince others who are right-wing about stuff.
Mm.
And even those who are already convinced, like who already are very confident about their beliefs, right? So it's not like someone who is in the middle, is like, yeah, man, I don't know, like God killing some people, it just doesn't sound cool, man. And when someone would read this paper, like god god like God gives libertarian free will because he wants people to be ultimately responsible for their action. And I read this whole paper at one time. I forgot now, like it was 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. It was published 2019. Yeah, I just read this paper 2 or 3 years ago. Um,
Mm.
so it's just when I read these papers, I would think like, what are philosophers of religion doing, man? It's just so stupid, right? No. What are your thoughts on this like ultimate responsibility stuff? Do you find it plausible?
Well, I haven't read this paper. I didn't even know of it. So it's hard for me to have a considered judgment. I'm not going to comment on the paper, but I will say that I don't I don't find the mainstream Christian attitudes towards the afterlife to be very plausible. In particular, what has always struck me as odd is the idea that what determines the quality of your afterlife, or whether you have one, in the case of if we're comparing heaven and annihilationism, what determines the quality of your afterlife is solely the acts that you conduct during your a short part of your existence, right? Because I mean, my evangelical friend says this to me a lot. You and I are immortal, right? And that's important on the Christian worldview. Humans have immortal souls, so death is only death of the physical body. The person continues to exist beyond the death of the physical body. So each of us has at least a potentially infinite life, and would only not have an infinite life if God puts an end to it. God's the only one that can. Um, okay, so the quality of your life after the death of your physical body solely depends on the choices you make during that short time where you have a physical body. You have this infinite amount of time after, but the quality of that completely depends and only depends on what you do in this very short time where you actually have a physical body. That makes no sense whatsoever. Why would an omnipotent, omniscient being set things up that way? And by the way, when you're in this physical body, you have very limited knowledge. This is something that I think a lot of human beings just don't want to accept, and that is that knowing things is very, very hard. So hard that most of us don't know very much at all,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
So we don't know very much, and we're put in this body according to Christianity, and the quality of our afterlife depends upon the decisions we make under the constraint of extreme ignorance. that doesn't make any sense. A good God wouldn't do that. So when people say, well, God is perfect, God is good, if you believe that God would do that, if you believe that a God would set things up that way, you do not believe in a good God.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much agree with. Pretty much agree with that fully. Right, and like let me show you their specific line. They they literally say we offer this view. The ultimate responsibility solution we will defend. Okay, now we want to turn to a view which we think is the best solution. We will defend this view against a few objections in the next section. What we think is intrinsically valuable is that God creates agents who have ultimate responsibility when it comes to morally significant actions. And I thought, like, immediately, it's like, what? I was like, what? Oh, really? I was like, that's like, like if when someone says torture is bad, Jason, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, that's true. But when someone says like ultimate responsibility is so intrinsically valuable, so important, I
Yeah.
go like, what the fuck are you saying? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it does. It is an odd claim. I mean, maybe it's right. I'd have to think about it more, but it doesn't seem obvious. Um, one thing, this is a bit of a digression, but I'm skeptical that anybody who thinks that moral value depends on God can believe that anything has intrinsic value whatsoever. Because intrinsic value is the value that something has in virtue of its intrinsic nature, right? If all moral value depends on God, then nothing has an intrinsic value because of its intrinsic nature, right? What, and I know that, well, I shouldn't say I know. I think Frederick True thinks this. I know that William Lane Craig thinks this. That is, that he thinks that if God doesn't exist, then moral value doesn't exist. No moral value whatsoever exists. Right? So if God doesn't exist, then you and I have no moral value. None of our actions have moral value. None of our states of consciousness have moral value. So your pain has no moral value. My pain has no moral value. Your pleasure has no moral value. My pleasure has no moral value. That's what Craig thinks. Anyone who thinks that moral value depends on God thinks that. Well, then, on that view, there's no such thing as intrinsic. Nothing has intrinsic moral value except perhaps God, but nothing like something has extrinsic value when it has that value because of how it relates to something else, right? If we only have value because God exists, then we only have value because of how we relate to God, in which case our value is not intrinsic, it's extrinsic.
yeah, yeah. Also, did you see this? It seems to us that of it seems to us that a world in which God creates agents who have ultimate responsibility with respect to morally significant actions is better than a world in which God creates agents who never have such responsibility. And I thought, oh, really? I thought that's new. I really thought that's like that seems weird. Like, what are you saying? Right? It's like, yeah, it's like, so if I am ultimately responsible for morally significant actions, so like moral significance, like genocide, um, is better than a world in which God creates agents who never have such responsibility. I mean, I would want God to create a world where there's no genocide, I mean,
Yeah.
but like it's so like if this claim even is like intuitive, it's like in the bottom of the list um, of intuitiveness, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Like there are a large amount of things much more intuitive than
Yeah.
than like than like we being ultimately responsible is so good. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't want that kind of power. I don't want that kind of responsibility. right? It's like if God puts like a nuclear red button in my room, and if I press that button even by mistake, I half the world is like nuked, right? Half the world just is destroyed by nuclear disaster, and radiation destroys like 25% extra, so only like um very few people are left now. And if God gave me that ultimate responsibility, or like whatever morally significant action, I would hate God. I would hate that God. Like, oh, you moron. Why did you give me that? Right? It's like giving me a gun. No, sorry, I mean giving a child a gun or something. But yeah, I guess this is the. I guess that's it for like the for chat, because we have been like chatting quite long. I guess I'm going to stop the video. Stick around. I want to like
Okay.
ask your feedback. I'm going
Okay.
to stop the video now.
Yeah.
I mean, stop recording. Sorry. Not stop the
Yeah,
video.
yeah,
Stop the
yeah.
recording. I mean.
Sure.